Hey guys, this is Pimp here. I got another little trick for you guys. I heard about this channel on YouTube that has a lot of good analysis on it. You know, a lot of good points to be made. And fuck, I did it again. It's just Thorin's stupid YouTube channel.
Complexity in incredible and unexpected fashion were able to win the Blast Premier Spring Series final, the most important tournament of this online era thus far, in as much as it would have already been a really big tournament. Like, it didn't have the same qualification or sign-up issues of ESL Pro League. It had way better teams than Flashpoint. It had great prize money. It did have a massive LAN circuit originally planned. It started as a LAN group stage, then went to an online format. Even had like a second chance mode with some of the teams in the showdown and let teams like Fnatic, like Mouse come through and actually compete against them and could have gone to the finals. Obviously, that's where certain teams were able to make their way through. And then eventually culminated, yes, we had to be online in this big online finals. Sure, regionalised, but in this case, Complexity won the European one, right? It's not even like they were in NA. I mean, they're not an NA team, actually, even though as an org, they're NA. As a team, 3/5 European, obviously, and they're stuck in Europe. So they were playing in the harder region even. So great production as well, strong selection of teams, partly because of the second chance. Listen, sure, it's online, and that will always be a little asterisk next to it. Just will be. But this is a major accomplishment for them now, and for what was possible to be done right now, this is pretty much the biggest you could do, especially bearing in mind where they've come from as a team, as an org. So if people forget, it was on the 25th of August last year that Jason Lake made his infamous Juggernaut tweet, where he said, right after his team was eliminated from the major, Starlight Berlin major, "I love our players as individuals, but these results won't be tolerated. If you're a tier 1 player looking for a fresh start at the best facility in the world, hit me up. I'll pay your buyout and give you the world's highest salaries. Let's build a juggernaut. Spread the word." Now, obviously, Complexity already had Dallas Cowboys, the NFL team, in terms of investment and backing, so they had the money to potentially make this happen. The issue is, when he went out there and he talked to these players and he eventually announced players, they weren't the names people were thinking of. People thought when it said that it was going to be Nico or Simple or some, like, we're talking like top 10 player in the world, some massive name, some titanic figure, because he'd made such a bold statement and talking about giving you the highest salaries in the world. So then, 26th of September, he signs Blame F, in-game leader, best fragger in Heroic, and Rush, major champion a couple of years ago, but someone who was considered somewhat washed up, wasn't even that good on Cloud9, etc. towards the end. So he had one sick player, but then again, still a rising talent, hasn't quite established himself yet, hasn't had the chance to, but still has only done it at like tier 2 level realistically, in the odd upset of tier 1. And they had one player that, let's be real, was at that point in his career, Rush, he was kind of meh. It was whatever, you know, like, I saw this move, and of all the 5 players, I thought this is the one where it's like, why has he done that? Like, was there just nobody left for the 5th spot? So when the first set of signings was announced, because he'd made such grand statements, and people had heard behind the scenes, he's talking to Alexi B, he's talking to other names. When he comes out with Blame F as his first signing, like, this is the number 1 guy, like, this is my guy I've been able to go out there and give the massive side to, he was routinely mocked by Reddit, by many people in the community, because, like I say, they expected that first name to be Nico from FaZe, or maybe Naf comes out of Team Liquid who just had their issues, or some superstar player. They knew he was talking to famous players, they knew he was making them offers, so this makes it look like this is going to be small potatoes. If that's your best player, who's your 3rd or 4th best player going to be? This isn't going to be a team that challenges. So on the 6th of November, though, he comes up with another couple of interesting moves. He signs Config and he signs Poison. Now, he kept Obo, who was kind of the young up-and-coming player. He's still, let's face it, he's probably still another year away from being like a top player, but he has some skills. But then again, quite frankly, he hadn't done anything to suggest he would be in a juggernaut team in 2020. So you see these signings, like Poison had never done anything yet. Like, he'd been a good tier 2 player. He'd had the good success at WESG, but he'd had some underground hype, but he hadn't been able to do much with that. Config used to be one of the absolute best players and still has some of the best mechanical skill. But as people know from my article, he'd been mailing it in for ages, been fucking around, doing all sorts of stuff outside the server. So as a result, like, this isn't a guy you'd put your money in. This is someone people wanted to pay the buyout for or invest in. There's a reason why Astralis wasn't going after this guy, even though in theory later on they would need to get players, etc. There's a reason why they didn't sign him, if people know the story from Zonic's book. So in this initial period when they had these first players, well, first of all, obviously I said there, he signed some of them in September, and then he signed the others in November. So in the meantime, he was playing tournaments and they were doing nothing, quite frankly. Then he gets the real lineup together, the real 5-man lineup, and they're losing everything online. They're qualifying to nothing. They're losing to even nobodies Teams you wouldn't even have heard of. Teams that have done nothing. It wasn't, in fact, this year until something like their 5th opportunity that they were able to qualify in the old qualification system to potentially be going towards the major. So then let's add in, during the same time period he's trying to sign these guys and he's announcing them, before that major previously in the summer, he'd let Stanislaw go, and Stanislaw had gone to NRG, now EG. Now, when Stanislaw goes to EG, first of all, they're top 4 at the major. They're beating Astralis in big series and winning ESL New York. They're winning other tournaments, Star Series. They're top team at many tournaments. They get to number 2 rank in the world. This makes Jason Lake, before he's got his other team ready, look silly. It makes him look small time. It makes him like, mate, Juggernaut. I don't find talent. You missed the talent that was in your team. And now you're getting people who never were, maybe never will be, and people who were just good, but they're not worthy of the best salaries in the world, are they? Then you add in, because he was a partner of Blast and got invited to that tournament, people were complaining like, come on, man, this should be Fnatic, this should be Mousewatch. Listen, I get it. On terms of skill, it should be. In terms of partnering with organisations, interesting stories that we could potentially tell there. So Blast Spring comes along. I'm talking about the Spring Series, the offline portion that was in London in like February, March, or whatever it was. His team's in a group. They've never done anything online at this point. I've never played a LAN game with this 5-man lineup. The group they have is Astralis, Vitality, and Na'Vi. Now, Astralis, I think at this point in time, was still the number 1 team in the world. And they hadn't yet dropped off because this was the first tournament it started. So, the greatest lineup of all time. You're definitely not supposed to have a chance to beat them. But okay, let's look at the other names. Vitality ended the end of the previous year really strong. So when they still had Alex, they'd won Epicenter. Looked like they're getting their stuff together. They've had a few top 4s. Pretty strong team. Got Zero, arguably the best player in the world at the time. Okay, it's going to be tough to beat them. Then you go over to Na'Vi. This was actually the tournament where Na'Vi themselves came through this group and then later went to Katowice and showed us they were very dominant. But listen, forget the fact that Na'Vi was in kind of like up and down form. Doesn't matter. This is a team where they made second place at the Ice Challenge just before. They have Simple, another contender for best player in the world. They have insane firepower. They have quality experience. They have a great coach. Like, this is the hardest group for any underdog team. You essentially, functionally have no chance to get out. And what happens? They shocked the world. They 2-0'd Astralis, they 2-0'd Vitality, and they lost to Na'Vi in the final. But as we later saw, Na'Vi was powering up to a very strong run over that tournament before this tournament, and then later at Katowice where they were incredibly dominant. That looks even better in hindsight now that you know what Na'Vi did. So the problem here is that particular performance at Blast Spring had too many fluke factors associated with it. Like, Poison literally looked like one of the best AWPers in the world. I could see teams didn't know what to do against him. Even like Astralis was just getting smacked up by this guy, aggressively taking his angles and just hitting all his shots against them. Obo top fragged against Astralis, this young kid who's done nothing, and quite frankly, he hasn't done much of that since. Rush's numbers were way too good, and we could see he was playing kind of a supportive, times maybe entry role. So you know what? Yeah, blame F. I would say he's a pretty good player. Config wasn't that sick though. The problem is that here, the 2 players that actually you would expect to be the best, they're not really doing that much. Like on paper, Blame F and Config are the people you're hoping for in the team. Then you consider the whole team overall was fragging out. They finished that group stage. I'm not talking about their group, the whole group stage entirely. Something like 4th highest in terms of overall like fragging, in terms of like the numbers. This is bonkers stuff. They were hitting weird timings, hence why they were able to win some 2-0s. This just didn't look replicable. This just looked like, that's an amazing one-off. It'll never happen again. The map pool seemed way too strong. They were good on Dust 2, a map loads of teams play. They were good on Vertigo, specialist map. They were good on Mirage, again a map that's right there in the middle for most people. And they were good on Inferno, one of the most played maps. If you're going to be really good and win loads against the best teams in the world on Dust 2, Mirage, Inferno, and you've got Vertigo in your back pocket, you could be one of the best teams in the world. So the problem is, you look at that, you would be a fool to say, I'll bet all my money on this right now. This will definitely happen again. This is totally legit. You'd actually say, reasonably, no matter how much you enjoyed watching them play, I'll wait and see on this one. I'll wait and see what they do at the next tournaments. But you know what? Then they went to a DreamHack Anaheim. DreamHack Open. Now, this wasn't a tournament stacked with the top teams in the world. And as you usually find out, teams that have upsets at the big tier 1 events then go to DreamHack Opens and don't even win these things. And guess what? They didn't here. They were just top 4 at that tournament. They lost to Genji in the group. They lost to Furia in 3 maps in the semi-finals. And that was before all this hype about Furia. That was when they were just another solid team that had upset potential. So then after that, they continued to fail for the major until the very last chance. Major ends up getting postponed anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Then you consider, because they're an EU team, due to 3 of the players being from EU, and them staying in EU and not being from any, they're in a harder region, playing harder opposition, and in fact, to qualify for the major is going to be even harder. That's part of the issue, including all these tournaments. When we went online, it should have been harder for complexity. They weren't actually just playing against a general field. They were playing against just Europe's best teams. So they're in ESL Pro League, Season 10 Europe. They come 10th to 12th. And they had a very playable group, by the way, because they had Na'Vi, best team in the world. They had Fnatic, who, listen, actually went on to win this tournament. But then they had Forza. Okay, Forza's solid, but actually Complexity done more on LAN in terms of that big performance. They had North, who was a laughingstock, and they had Big, who at the time nobody really cared about. Listen, they'd done something at DreamHack, but that's it. That's still a team you should have a chance to beat in light of your offline results. So you should be competing for that 3rd spot there. In fact, on paper, Complexity maybe even should have been favoured to come out the group 3rd and go into the playoffs. Well, they actually only missed making the playoffs by 1 series. They lost to Fnatic and Na'Vi, the teams that were totally acceptable to lose to, two of the best LAN teams in the world, but they also lost to Forza. And the problem is, listen, I'll always say this, Russian/CIS teams online can be very tricky to deal with. Their style of play sometimes seems more effective there, but even so, that's the series you had to win if you wanted to kind of make an impact on this tournament. Then you come to ESL Road to Rio Europe. Again, we're in the scenario where we're trying to have the online qualification for the major now. They come 13th to 14th. Now, they did get the harder group in this one. They had Astralis, they had NIP who was starting to look decent, they had Vitality who was up and down, not that good, they lost Alex, they had Heretics who ended up actually, they weren't very good at the time, but they ended up being a shock for everyone in most of these tournaments. ENCE, not in great shape, sure, but nice name. Fnatic still good at this point in time, they've won ESL Pro League, and they had Dig, bunch of legends, admittedly not that good. Now, in this particular tournament, you only needed to make it to top 6, and they missed it again by 1 series. They lost to Fnatic, Astralis, Vitality, those are all totally fine. They lost to NiP. Okay, a little bit more touch and go. If you want to be a top team, you probably should be competitive there. But the key is they lost to Heretics. So if you notice here, there's 2 trends. One, they're 1 series away from the playoffs each time. In one case, the first group, they probably should have made it but didn't, but by 1 series into a team that could upset you and seemed better online. Then they go to the other group, way harder one. They shouldn't make the top placing actually, but they miss it by 1 spot again, and by losing to this time an underdog team who seems to be good online, and again it's just so close to do it. So even though they have bad placings, they're not actually as terrible as they originally look if you look at the expectations, but they're certainly not the work of the team that offline was looking like a monster. So in the run up to the Blast Spring Series EU finals, they were grinding so hard. They played something like, I think it was like 107, 110 maps in 3 months. This is bonkers amount. And that's not counting practices, theory crafting time. They were playing those home sweet home cups where they were playing tier 2 and tier 3 teams. They won 4 of them. They even beat Big in a series, who obviously now has gone on to be pretty good. But otherwise, yeah, it was lesser teams. It was the endpoints of the world. Then they come to DreamHack Masters Spring Europe. And again, it's not a great placing. They're only 9th to 12th. They lost to Fnatic, but hey, it was a 3-game series. Fair enough. Their map was a close win. They lost to Big, who actually we've now found out is pretty good, right, at DreamHack. 3-game series again. This time, pretty close affair. Again, actually an overtime win for Complexity. They beat Mad Lions, who's a team on the rise. Pretty solid team. A team that won Flashpoint. And they actually beat them on Mirage and Vertigo. Maps that you know that the guys from Mad Lions love Mirage. They know how to play this map. Then they beat Mouse Sports, who, listen, this is part of them on their slump, but they beat them 2-0. They beat them handedly. So again, this isn't terrible when you look at who they're losing to and when they're losing to. Listen, Fnatic had started to drop off a bit, but the big loss doesn't even matter in the end now when you look at it. So now we come now to the Blast Premier Spring Finals, the tournament that they end up winning. So here's what happens here. In the bracket, they were able to beat OG in the opening one. Pretty nice one. Blame F goes ham, of course. They then go against Na'Vi. Listen, Na'Vi had been in something of a slump, but still, it's got strong players. They beat Na'Vi, the team that had beaten them back at Blast Spring offline portion, 3 maps. Blame F and Config go off. Simple goes off as a really big opening map that Na'Vi win. Doesn't matter. They come back, they win anyway. They beat FaZe 2-0. At the moment, really strong fragging team. Obo goes ham. Config's pretty good. They managed to win their own pick this time at least. Then they beat Vitality in the finals to win the whole thing. 3-map series. They lose the first one, Vertigo, massively. They have to win Mirage overtime, which is their pick. And then they win Nuke in close fashion to take the title. Now, interestingly, at this tournament, they were able to win their pick 2 times. and lose their pick 2 times. So it shows that, you know what, they're still a weird team. They're still not like established in the same sense that the truly great teams are. But you look at who they beat. They beat OG, ranked number 21 by HLTV at the time. They beat Na'Vi, ranked number 6. They beat FaZe, ranked number 3. They beat Vitality, number 10. Now, when I say that, like 6, 3, 10, it doesn't sound that crazy, right? Except you have to remember at this point in time, some of the other top 6 teams that they didn't play are Fnatic, who's slumping, Astralis, who doesn't have the players that got them there, and Furia, who plays in NA and you can't play against them. So you look at this tournament, Blame F, unlike the Spring Series offline portion, has monster numbers. We're talking plus 61, like MVP candidate. Config has strong fragging. Clearly with the eye test plays a great role, has plus 30 in his differential. Everyone else fragged decent or like at the level that they'd normally have on par even when they're playing those lesser cups. Everything's looking good. Now maybe this is the Juggernaut, right? So going forwards, let's look at this complexity team. In terms of fragging, you've got Blame F, your IGL, who is really strong at fragging right now and has really low deaths, which is very, very promising. That actually suggests to me, listen, I think he's playing a little bit of like kind of a Happy lurk in some senses, but he does the pressure lurk that Happy famously wouldn't do in his latter years. And he's been good versus top teams. That's the key thing. He was already showing very good upset potential when Heroic would get those odd wins last year when they were going against the top teams. So really impressive stuff from him. That's looking really solid. Suddenly that number 1 pick by Jason looks genius. Then you have Config, who's a strong fragger. Listen, he dies a lot, but that's obviously his style. It's his role. It's kind of what you want from Config. You want him to just run in there and have big balls. He's got star power. He's got the star mentality. Then you have Obo, who holds his own. Yeah, he has clear inexperience still. And yeah, I'll just say he did overperform, in my opinion, versus top teams thus far. But he's the guy with potential. He's the guy who doesn't have to be good yet when some of the others are good. Poison, I think, overall hasn't really lived up to the level he showed at Blast Spring. I can understand why people like Alex from Vitality thought they were just kind of hitting shots and wouldn't replicate it there, especially versus the top teams. I haven't thought he looked as good. But if you look with the eye test, when he's hitting, his style looks crazy. Like, he looks strong. He looks like someone, yeah, again, he might be a year away from being the next Cirque in that regard. Rush is obviously not a great fragger, but you hear all these great stories about how he contributes elsewhere, he does comms, he helps people in terms of entries, he's playing any role you need in the game. I think in his career, he's kind of trying to do what Tarek does over in EG and just be the glue guy in that sense. So this team's starting to look better and better and better over time. You look at their map pool, they have good depth on the 3 that they're strong on. They don't have good breadth or width though. So the 3 that they're pretty strong on is Mirage, Nuke and Dust 2. On Mirage, I mean, over the last few months, they're 7-2. They've won 2 of their last 4. They've had some close wins, sure, but they've beaten some really quality teams. This is some of the teams they beat on Mirage. Vitality, Ents, Nip, Mad Lions, Big, Na'Vi, Vitality again. These are big-time wins, guys. Like, they are a very good team on Mirage. I'd actually say on Mirage, you can put them in one of those top X teams in the world list when you consider who they've beaten this year on it. On Nuke, they've won 6 of their last 10, and 4 of their last 5, so they've come on really strong. That's part of the reason they were able to win this particular Blast tournament, and part of those wins were against the likes of, they've beaten Astralis when they were good, or maybe that was actually the dodgy one. They've beaten Astralis, Fnatic, OG, FaZe, Vitality. These are all quality wins. Like, none of these are against bombs, guys. Then on Dust 2, listen, it's a little bit more in the middle. They've won 4 of their last 7, but it's Dust 2. People can lose that. And crucially, they've won 4 of their last 6, so they're on a heater right now. And that includes wins over Big, Mouse Sports, Na'Vi, FaZe. These are teams that play Dust 2. These are teams that can be very strong on Dust 2. On Inferno, we're down to the 4th map. They've won 3 of their last 5, so winning record. They won their last 2, winning against Big and Mouse. Teams that certainly played. They've won against Na'Vi on that map. Losses to teams like Vitality and Fnatic, teams that certainly play Inferno. So again, that's pretty solid. Like, that's probably better than the record looks. But then you have Vertigo. That's not the strength it was before. Like, they've won 1 of their last 5, and it was only against Mad Lions. They've lost to a whole bunch of other teams, including some teams, listen, that play Vertigo. On Train, they've won 1 of their last 5. They've lost to a whole bunch of teams. Yes, obviously some of them teams that play a Train, but some of these, you've got to get some wins here and there. And then Overpass, they don't play. So the map pool is a concern for me, because it means going up, it's going to be about the matchups, not their overall form. Because if you think about what we've discussed so far, they basically got to win Mirage, because they can get it against a lot of teams. And also, it's a map where fragging's essential, more so in my opinion than some of the other maps, and they can sometimes come with that from the big names, and they've kind of stabilised. So that's a positive. You can be in the series, and you're probably going to get to play it. Teams picking Dust 2 against them is going to help them a lot. So FaZe Clan, Na'Vi, you guys are helping them if you pick Dust 2 against them, and they'll have a shot to beat you, and then they can lose Mirage and potentially beat you on that map and get it to a 3rd map, because they have a lot of 3rd map wins. Now, teams that let them play if not Mirage as the opener, Mirage, Nuke or Dust2 as the decider, are also going to be teams that they can potentially match up with, upset, or just outright beat. So we've already seen it against Vitality, OG and Na'Vi, and they lost to Fnatic, but Fnatic's a team that does that. They'll have chances again there. You think of some of the other teams they could have played Big, could have played Mouse, could have played Mad Lions. These are teams where they're going to give you those chances. This means this is why it's getting more and more positive, is as much as I said the map pool will be essential, what I'm essentially doing now is telling you most of the top teams have map pools that are viable for coL to go into. So G2, the number one team right now, would actually be fine for complexity map pool wise. You look at Team Liquid. Team Liquid's a team where their bands that they come in with is Train, Vertigo and Fun. They're the maps that Complexity doesn't in theory want to play. I think what's interesting is if they could play Furia, I'd love to see that best of three. Because Furia plays Vertigo. They play Train as decider. EG, how about that one, eh? You don't think of it, but they've got the fragging to match them. They play Inferno. They're willing to have a Train decider. Fnatic has the map pool that goes both ways. They'll be comfortable against Fnatic, but Fnatic will be comfortable against them and beat them. And Big, again, has an interesting map pool, but actually the overlap means that if Big's in better form, Big can beat them on it. So I think it's quite interesting. There's not that many teams that are really dangerous for them. There's some that they'll have a better chance than you'd think by the name value. They have to obviously frag to that level. And there's some where you'd probably be shocked that they'll match up well against them. So in terms of general sort of overview of scouting report, they've got to win Mirage. Ideally, people pick Dust2 against them. They've got to stay away from teams that first pick Inferno, Vertigo or Train. So the teams that will be most obvious that could do that, at least to win their map pick, are Vitality, Na'Vi, G2, NiP, ENCE, North. Notice some of those names aren't the ones you'd think of as the bigger names, right? But those are teams that can certainly push them in a series. They need the decider ideally to be Nuke or Mirage. So the Vitalities, OGs, Na'Vis of the world. That's certainly interesting. Though, quite frankly, they lost to Fnatic and Big in those scenarios, so they can also lose if there's an overlap. But what's cool for me is, first of all, the Juggernaut storyline. Jason Lake has a history of doing this in 1.6. He did a very similar set of circumstances. I'll actually explain that in some upcoming content. Don't confuse like the early complexity in CSGO. He essentially just inherited most of that lineup from, there was only 2 decent cores at the time, and he really only got the players that made that core very good because of a dispute between like Hiko, Semphis and Dazed back in Quantic, and then they split apart and eventually Dazed went to the iBuyPower route, and the other guys went to the complexity and later Cloud9 route, but they weren't even in Cloud9 for that long, so don't get confused by that. He had the 1.6 Juggernaut that became one day the best team in the world and shocked the world. He shocked the world here in, yes, an online tournament, but a major tournament for this year, and let's see where they can go because they're looking kind of nice and they're looking like a real fun team to watch as a potential dark horse to upset squads in these big tournaments. This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Bobby, Dean Tanglis, Istar, JDubs, Jensen Goh, the Puyallup Tribe, Soliko, Spencer Green, Tobias Bernasconi, Xinged, and a special thanks, as always, goes out to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you want to ask me a question in those AMAs I do each month. Do you want teasers for who's going to appear next on my content? Maybe you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions about esports with me. Well, if so, then put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.